I got asked if I wanted to be part of the Sonic movie, but they weren't willing to change the title. They got to go fat. Hi everyone, welcome to Behind the Weebs, a look behind the scenes of SunnyCon Anime Expo and what it takes to run a convention in the United Kingdom. I'm Tucky the Ambassador, Tucky the Weeb, hopefully I'm pointing in the right direction this time. And today I am looking, I'm looking back, I'm always looking back, it's always memories of behind the scenes. But today we're looking back from 2010 to 2020. Now, when we started, we weren't a convention, we weren't always a convention. I used to be long-term unemployed. But now, through the years, I've went from being an anime and merchandise trader to convention organizer, and that's been a steep learning curve in itself. However, I was there back in 2010 before those conventions, like every week, and it was a different landscape then. And this is just me looking back as to what it was back in 2010 to what it is now in 2020, especially because most of our viewers are young enough to, remember that 2010 was probably their 4th birthday. And it's it's a weird thing to have like this kind of this point of view that I was there back in 2010 to see how far conventions and events have came, especially now in 2020 when they're more prevalent. Right, so the first point is back in 2010, there wasn't that many events around, especially more so for the anime community. And now in 2020, there's events every single week of the year practically. And it's amazing to see like the growth of the community, the growth of the industry as such, that we've got different specific niche events as well on top of that, where you get like special fandom events, where back in the day we used to have just Comic Cons and anime conventions really, and there was a few kind of like sci-fi ones. I think Doctor Who had its own niche event and Star Trek as well, but they were more of the larger corporate ones. And back in 2010, when we first started doing market research to see if it would be viable to have an event, and it was very viable. Whereas now, if I was looking back like in 2020 to start a new event, I would take a lot of consideration before I'd be persuaded to start a new event. Case in point is when we started Liverpool, we knew that the market was oversaturated. I believe there was about 7 to 8 different events running that exact weekend as well. So that's with 2 years of planning ahead of time. So it's a tougher marketplace if you want to get started in it. But back in 2010, you didn't have that kind of rivalry. Anybody, if you were going up and starting a convention, you could contact other conventions and say, look, what are your dates? And we don't want to clash. Which we actually did. And there was room enough for everybody. But now it's a lot tougher. Definitely a lot tougher, especially if you're starting out. Second point is 2010, there was a different type of audience than there is nowadays. More so because conventions were always seen as kind of a niche thing, kind of like I don't know, kind of social outcast. If you were a social outcast, you would be like, oh well, you go to conventions, don't you? And it was frowned upon. It was kind of a stigma around it. But going through to 2020, everyone's attending conventions. You even got celebrities like cosplaying and sneaking in and attending conventions. It's that much of a popular thing to do now. Even and what we've seen is we've moved from the more dedicated hardcore niche fan of fandoms or anime, back then, and to more kids who like Marvel. And that's one of the things, as we've seen like going on through the events, is our audience age range has actually lowered quite a lot, and there's a lot more of the youth actually taking up going to conventions and attending and seeing their favorite voice actors or movie star guests. And I guess it's one of the things that I predicted for the future 2020 video, that the younger audience is going to become more prevalent now, and over the last decade it's definitely went that way. Whereas before we'd have like a professional working person with lots of disposable income being like the main target audience. Through the years, it's the audience age is actually like lowered on average, and we're seeing it lower even further still with more families now bringing kids to it, like as young as like newborns. and it's a good thing on one side because you've got the future there sorted. There's lots of kids coming in, and they're going to grow old, and they're going to have fond memories of your first events. Next point is, in 2010, if you were starting a convention, you had to have a specific type of venue, and nowadays anywhere's a venue, which is it's kind of like yay for the resourcefulness of humanity, but there are some misfires along the way. And when we started, we wanted to hold the event in Sunderland. And for anybody who knows Sunderland, there are about 2 venues, maybe 3 venues at the time that were worth like holding an event of our size in. I mean, we didn't know what size we were going to be. We expected our first year, our estimate was about 300 people, and we had 901 turn up. So it was kind of like, yeah, and wow, and everybody, we're responsible for nearly 1,000 people over a weekend. But back then it was, you had to hold an event either in a hotel or conferencing facility or like a big conference centre. There was no in between, yeah, because you had the residential or conference centre, and that was it. Then were the 2 options that people really went for, and the reason for that is because it's functional. You know, hotel conferences, they've got the facilities there, they're equipped and built for these type of events. Same with conferencing centres, bigger halls, bigger foot space, you know, usually landmark venues. And there wasn't really that many kind of diverging away from that. But when we started up, we had, well, Stadium of Light was out of our budget. So we were like, so what other venues can we have? And we, by having to stumble across Crowtree Leisure Centre, and I think we were one of like the first ones to actually use a leisure centre as an event venue, which caught on a lot, and a lot of new startup events or events since through the time of 2010 to 2020, a lot of them have been at leisure centres. We've seen some really weird ones, community centres, church halls. I once went to a convention held in an MMA gym, uh, in Hartlepool of all places. Not the best equipped. As we went on through for SunnyCon 3-4, we had to adapt because our usual leisure centres got shut down for demolition. So we had to kind of improvise and use a pub and bar with an outdoor marquee system. Wouldn't advise it, but yeah, again, it's more types of venues. You can hold them pretty much anywhere now, and what we're seeing now in 2020, you can, anywhere that's got a roof over its head, you can basically call it a venue and say, well, I'm holding a convention here, and this convention's being held in ice cream vans practically. Don't hold a convention in an ice cream van if anybody takes that seriously. But the point is, like, before it used to be this strict set of rules, like you hold a convention in your hotel or a conference centre, or there's no point in holding a convention. But as we've went on, and because there is apparently money in it, people have used that kind of creativity and adapted to loads of venues, and it's fascinating on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like there's now too many places calling themselves conventions, which don't really meet the criteria of conventions anymore. Is from 2010 to 2020, there has been a gigantic move and shift, tectonic movement, shall we say, in the attitude of the general public towards convention goers. This kind of ties in with the first point, but it's more so that when we started a convention back in 2012, and when we started attending conventions back in 2010, if people saw anybody out on fancy dress and it wasn't on a stag do or a hen do, then there would be a lot of people, like the general public would really frown, and the looks you would get. For the first SunnyCon we ever had, we had somebody walking through the Bridges Shopping Centre, which was right next door to Crowtree, and they were carrying Ichigo's Zanpakuto sword, and that sparked a whole police operation, and that was one of the more interesting ones, because we thought, you know, that obviously it's a wooden sword. There's no way someone's going to walk around a city centre with a sword that big, but obviously you can't be too careful. So for us, that was kind of like a baptism of fire, having the police officers come to us and like, well, why weren't we informed about this? And we're like, but we've done the paperwork, and you know, we had this multi-agency like business plan thing put in place saying safety. Like, look, we're holding an event. People will be carrying fake weapons. Apparently, it didn't get through to them that year. It has every other year though. Apart from actually, it was two SunnyCons ago when they sparked it off with somebody carrying a fake gun. It's like, even though we're an annual event, they kind of forget every year. But that's beside the point. The point is, I've lost the point now. Back then, there wasn't this mainstream acceptance of people who like anime or even sci-fi or anything like that. You were always seen as an outsider, as a dork, as some kind of sweaty geek. And in fact, the nickname "sweaty" actually stuck, especially for like people who wore alternative clothing or were skateboarders and that. And yeah, that was a thing. You know, being people being abusive to you, singing "Skater Boy" at you. I remember them days. But it was it, humanity. But as it's went on, as we've seen like comic book movies take a more mainstream approach, and everybody all of a sudden, yeah, I love Marvel stuff, mate. And it's like, you weren't there at the beginning, and I don't want to be like that gatekeepery, sweaty nerd. But the amount of bullying that myself and like other anime fans, other sci-fi fans have went through from the same people who now are like, yay, Thanos. You know, it's like, thank you for moving forward, society, but you know, why couldn't you have done it sooner or just been more understanding? It's and with conventions over the years, the cosplayer scene especially, it's became more accepted. And if you see somebody out in cosplay, you'd have people come up and ask for pictures now. Whereas before you'd get like hacky looks, or somebody would try and assault you, or somebody would just shout insults at you. And it's a good thing that we've seen that we've moved on from that. But it's still that little nugget of kind of like, I want vengeance for all the pain and suffering that they caused me back then. Point for this, back in 2010, we didn't really use the internet that much. I know the internet was around. I know lots of people can remember old modems and whatnot. But back in 2010, we didn't really use the internet to its full capacity. And when we started doing the event, our online kind of advertising and promotions, they were very, very limited within their appeal and how we could use them. We mainly used Facebook and Facebook groups to try and get the word out there and try and advertise to a new audience. But it was very limited back then, and a lot of our attendees actually came from us handing out flyers, either in Sunderland or in Newcastle, or when we gave them to stores to hand out. And there was a lot of support for us initially when we started up SunnyCon, and we've seen a lot more support since. But the community, the face, the whole context around the community has changed, because we're no longer individual pockets of communities like anime fans in the United Kingdom, especially. Like, you'd have like the London groups, the Manchester groups, Bristol groups, like the Scottish groups, and ones in Newcastle, North East, like Middlesbrough and Sunderland area. And with like technology evolving as it is, and humanity evolving, I suppose, we've gone from these little pockets of fandoms to a more global community. And we've seen that within our community, especially people travelling from Sunderland down to like Birmingham for events and down to London for the MCMs. A lot of people attend further afield, especially if they can afford it. Even if not, then people can see online how them events have gone. And it even gets to the point that now it's not just like a nationwide kind of thing. It's a global community. Like, where were you when DashCon failed spectacularly? Everybody saw the aftermath of that, and that was like somewhere in America. And the thing is, the whole con community came together to kind of laugh at its downfall. And I think it'll happen for any other event. If something bad happens in an event, it's out there pretty much instantly, and you can make your memes. And it's how we've evolved from these little pockets in the community, where it's good for us as events, because we can get a further reach to people. We can turn around and say, like, put something out there, and people, as far as like the Americas or even Japan can see it. And it's mind blowing to know that we have that kind of power now to reach such a wide audience. And the community, like I say, it's the community that's changed, because back in 2010, it would be like if it was on the internet, it'd be on forums, like hidden specific niche forums, and you had to have like a decent building up, and there was a lot of kind of elitism in there as well, amongst these communities, and over time that's kind of eroded away to a more, well, everybody's just everybody from everywhere taking the mick out of everything. So it's a great thing. Don't get us wrong, you know, obviously when you look back, you don't want to look back on 2010 and think, well, times were better back then, because that's how Brexit happens. But it's just like to see the evolution of the whole convention. So like I said, all these points, these are just like 5 points of like from 2010 to 2020. And I mean, we've evolved from selling merchandise all the way up to running a convention of our own. And this is our 10th year, and it was weird. That's what gave us the idea for this video. It was weird just to look back and think, you know, that I've had this decade of being there firsthand on the front line, seeing the evolution of events, and it's kind of exciting to see how further forward it will. Maybe in 10 years' time, I'll come back to 2020 versus 2030, how conventions have moved on, and we'll see how it goes then. So that's been it. I've been Tucky. Thank you for watching once again. Please remember, subscribe to our channel, like this video. It helps with our metrics. And once again, hope it's been educational, and I will catch you next time. Goodbye.